Hello, everybody. Well, welcome in. I am just Dylan riding solo today. So, as you've seen, I'm sure, we have had another few weeks without an episode come out. That is because of good news, actually, and for Charles, that is that he and his wife have welcomed a healthy and happy new baby into the world. So Charles is on paternity leave from Friends Talking Fantasy, but I figured I'd stop in here and just give some update, give it a try of what it's like for me to just come in and talk to y'all and see how long I can actually go just rambling by myself. So that's what I'm here to do. I have a few things that I want to talk about and want to hit here. One of which was that update about Charles. The other thing is I'm gonna try to record some more episodes. I'm thinking that I'm gonna try to just bring some guests on so they aren't just me talking solo into a mic until Charles, of course, gets back once he's settled into his new life. The Friends Talking Fantasy paternity leave is very generous, so Charles will come back when he's ready. But in the meantime, yeah, I'm thinking I'm gonna try to bring on some guests, and I have one person already lined up that I'm excited to talk to. Haven't talked to for quite some time. Another podcaster and total pro. So I'm sure it's going to be a great conversation when I have this person on. But I'm definitely thinking about who else I might want to reach out to, who else might be a good fit for just some probably real informal, low key conversations over the next few weeks. But definitely, if I can, I'll look to stop in and do solo episodes at least from time to time. And I really think should be able to bring some guests, some familiar, I would say faces, but I think I actually mean voices. Although I am trying to put this on YouTube. This is my first time recording something by myself that's going to hopefully have video. So if you're seeing this on YouTube, I'm waving at you. I'm here. I don't know how interesting it is to just have me by myself on YouTube, but I guess there's lots of people on booktube just recording them by themselves. They have fancier editing and cuts and stuff, right? It's like every single 4 second interval, it's like another cut and it restarts. And I am not going to develop the editing skills necessary for that in time for uploading this video, but I appreciate you hanging out in this boring, not attention span enabling or short attention span enabling version of me just talking long form into a mic. And just in general, I'm sure the editing, because Charles is on his paternity leave, the lack of editing will probably be relatively apparent right now. So I'm sorry if this sounds not nearly as good as it normally sounds, or if this looks much worse in video without Charles's handsome face there on the pod. And of course, we don't have that cool setup that Charles usually gets going for the few YouTube videos that we have made so far. So anyway, I'm going to try to keep this updated. Charles will be back eventually. And in the meantime, hope to have some real exciting guests come on. And yeah, reach out to the FTF podcast at gmail.com if you have guests you'd like to see come on. I would recommend if you were going to do that, then thinking of people that we've had on before and have strong relationships with, where they will be understanding of our current setup without Charles's skills and polish that make this a little bit of a stronger product. So, but reach out to us over email if you have folks who are like, I'd really love to hear from this person. I have a few in mind, but anyway. Another thing I wanted to get into what I've been reading lately, talk some about those books, and give some of my takes. Probably keeping this relatively spoiler free, but if for whatever reason I feel a strong desire to get deeper into this and give spoilers, then I will give notice beforehand. I'll tell you to turn it down in your headphones, as I often do. But yeah, want to get into that. And then there's a couple pieces of news, I guess. I'm not like Charles and I, we're not news breakers or people that really focus on keeping abreast of the most recent news going on. But there were a couple things that caught my eye. Not the cutting edge stuff necessarily, but stuff that's happened maybe in the last week or so that kind of interests me, that I figured I'd give my musings about. So I'll get into that as well. But let's start with what I've been reading in the meantime since you've last heard from me. I'm going to start with the one that probably is on people's minds, that people associate with us. You know, we've interviewed Joe Abercrombie, which is about the coolest thing that we've ever done. But maybe interviewing Joe Abercrombie and climbing Mount Doom are probably what Charles and I are most proud of. Oh yeah, and Charles probably his new baby, I would guess. Like, that whole fatherhood thing usually comes with being very proud. So interviewing Joe Abercrombie, having a new baby, what was the greatest moment of Charles's life? Who's to say? We'll have to ask him when he gets back. But in the meantime, I'll talk some about The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. And I think that this is an interesting one for me. And give me 1 second here. Let me look when it came out. Did it come out? I think it's saying May 6th. So it's been out for a bit. Usually I'll have read a Joe Abercrombie book quicker than this, but I had the kind of other books I was reading and things going on. I'll say also, like, another reason why things haven't been as on top of things here at FDF is I'm moving to Miami, so we're kind of in the process of making that happen. A move from Colorado to Miami is arduous. So anyway, I wasn't as on top, and a lot of times, like, maybe not a lot of times, I've only done this once, but for the last book in the Age of Madness, the wisdom of crowds, Charles and I were even able to get arcs before we interviewed Joe. So in that case, we read that book long before it actually came out. But this time, I'm a few weeks in, and I'm only 20% into The Devils. It's not a reflection of the quality of the book, but more a reflection of where my headspace has been at, which is very focused on moving a little all over the place and finishing up some other books. So, want to say, did I say already? I'm 20% into The Devils, and I've been, I would say, really enjoying it because it's got the Joe Abercrombie voice, and that's the most important thing for me when it comes to reading his books. And that's something that he's just gonna take wherever he goes, whatever he writes, whether it's first law or not first law. So for those of you who don't know, so Joe Abercrombie, famous for his first law universe books. He's also written a couple, or should say, he's written one series, Half a King. I don't know if that's the name of the series, but at least the name of the first book is Half a King. He's written that. It's a young adult series. But other than that, every full-length thing he's written has been in the first law universe, right? Starting with The Blade itself. Up there, probably our favorite series here at FDF. I also love the King Killer Chronicle, and there's lots of other awesome series that we've read here, but First Law just holds a very special place in our hearts. And I think that the Devils, which is interesting. It's a departure from the First Law universe, and while the tone, the writing style, the Abercrombie voice, like I said, are all firmly intact in this book, I guess what's what makes it. Let me start with this. I'll start with this. 20% or so in. We'll see where this goes. I'm really enjoying it. This is, barring something unforeseen, going to head toward a 5-star read for me. And that is because, I'm not going to make the, like, now cliche. I would read anything by Joe Abercrombie. I'd read his grocery list, like that kind of thing. But there is an element of truth to that for me, where I do enjoy Joe Abercrombie's voice so much, where anything he writes, I'm just going to be engrossed in, and it'd have to be something, like I said, unforeseen for me to end up thinking of it as any less than a great book, a 5-star read, whatever you want to call it. And 20% in, that's how I'm feeling about the Devils. But I do, there's something interesting here where I feel like for my personal enjoyment, it might not be at quite the level of if he came out with another First Law universe book, right? So he's kind of been moving the First Law universe forward in terms of technology, age, right? Age of Madness is kind of more industrial rather than feeling the old sword and sorcery style. And I would say, and we did talk, when we talked to Joe, I did mention the idea of First Law in space, and he, I think, did pause for a second. He was like, First Law in space? So if you do ever see that, I'm going to take full credit for the idea, and that would be extremely exciting. But this isn't First Law in space. It's not in space at all. It is a book that seems to be set in a more medieval setting, and I would say is very focused on the supernatural and, like, religious in some ways elements of its world, which is interesting because the world, I don't really know what's going on. As I said, I'm not that far into it, but there is reference to real world places in Europe and stuff in this book. So in some ways, I guess it's set in the real world, but there's a lot of elements of it that don't feel set in the real world at all. Like, if you just use different place names, I wouldn't think of it as the real world in any way. But anyway, yeah, it's got high supernatural elements, which maybe you could expect from a book called The Devils. And yeah, I think for me, the thing that makes the First Law universe books a little bit stronger, as I was kind of implying earlier, is that I think I just have this built-in affinity for the First Law world and its character. So, he keeps moving the world into the future, but then it's like you're reading about a character and like, oh, this is that other character's kid or something like that. And maybe even their parent is, if they've survived Joe's bloody massacre of a world thus far, then maybe the character's parent, who used to be a main character, is still present, even if they're not a main character anymore. So it's like these kind of things, that familiarity and that love and adoration for the world, the characters, although adoration, not every Joe Abercrombie character quite is endearing enough to produce that, but at least enjoyment, right? I always call them very captivating characters. I would say that I think what the Devils is just not gonna have and can't have is that piece of it, that affinity that you come in already holding if you're a big First Law fan, like I know many of our listeners are. So I think for me, yeah, enjoying it a lot. It's got all the things that you would want from a Joe Abercrombie book, except for, Logan Nine Fingers or Glocta or whatever, right? The characters that you know and perhaps love or perhaps hate as people, but love as characters. And all of that. And props to Joe for trying something different. You don't want to just get caught writing the same stuff over and over again if you're not, or the same world, I should say. It's not like it's the same stuff, but you don't want to get caught writing the same kinds of stories over and over again if you're not feeling it. And I know when we talked to Mark Lawrence at one point, I don't know if it was when we had him on the show or just in some sort of more written exchange, but Mark Lawrence, his first series and perhaps still his most popular series, though don't quote me on that, is the Broken Empire trilogy. And that is, I always have to be sure not to say Broken Earth because that's N.K. Jemisin, but yes, Broken Empire, and that starts with Prince of Thorns. The main character is, I think it's supposed to be pronounced Jorg, Jorg, but sometimes Jorg is said. But let's say Jorg, and Lawrence has said, okay, that was very popular and maybe the most financially prudent in terms of book sales version of Mark Lawrence's career might have involved just continuing to write Jorg novel after Jorg novel, right? Get to Jorg novel number 10. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of what Jorg's, right? It's like Prince of Thorns, King of Thorns, Emperor of Thorns are the books. So it's like, what would be 9 books down the road? Like, Retirement Home of Thorns or something like that, right? But he chose not to do that because we know Mark Lawrence, extremely inventive guy, always coming up with these different stories, different universes, vastly different from each other and really interesting in their own right. And if he just kept writing York novels, we never would have gotten, let's say, Red Sister, one of, I would say actually my personal favorite book that Mark has written, though I love them all. And I would say Joe, props for doing the thing you want to do and not just writing more First Law if that's not what you feel like doing right now, though I do want First Law in space eventually. But yeah, and we'll see. Maybe, like I said, I have a lot of book to go. Maybe by the end of it, I could be calling it his best work ever or whatever. But right now, still waiting to grab me at the same ridiculously extreme extent that his First Law books do. And we'll see if I get that level of emotional investment. It's tough. But again, we're nitpicking here between a 5-star read and I would give it 6 stars if I could. That's my my voice for I guess cliche feeling thing. So that's the Devils. Charles is 90%. He said, I think he texted me yesterday to say he was 90% into the Devils, but he didn't tell me what he was thinking of it. So I told him I was curious about that, and perhaps we'll end up waiting until we get him back to discuss where he's at. I don't know, because I've seen people who think this is his best book ever, and I wonder, I kind of feel like if Charles felt that level, he might have thrown that in the text, but who knows? Maybe he's trying to keep the mystery intact, and yeah, I hope that anyway, I was just thinking, I hope that we're able to discuss the Devils in length in a way where we both still remember it really freshly and well, but we'll see again. Charles will come back when he's ready. And anyway, that's what I gotta say on the Devils. I will probably pop back in at some point to give more my take. The only other thing I really wanted to say on the Devils is I've been reading it on Kindle, and the thing about that is a lot of our reads of the first law stuff more recently be like rereads of it, and my rereads have been very focused on audiobooking it. And Stephen Pacey, the audiobook narrator, is as good as it gets, and he's such a good fit too for Abercrombie's voice and universes. And I'm pretty sure he does the Devils as well. I've got to check that if I'm going to make this point, but I've been reading on Kindle, not audiobooking it, because I've been audiobooking the thing I'll talk about next, which is Red Seas Under Red Skies, a reread of that. So reading it on Kindle, the funny thing is, I'll read certain lines and I'll just like hear Stephen Pacey's voice in my head, like how I think he would have delivered it, and that's how entrenched the like Stephen Pacey Joe Abercrombie connection is. And I've been thinking, okay, when I do get done with Red Seas Under Red Skies audiobook, maybe I'll work in that kind of, they call it whisper sync, I believe, where like your Kindle and your Audible accounts are connected, because Amazon and Bezos rule the universe, and both of those things are can connect with ease. So whether that's morally okay or not, I do support Audible and Kindle by using them. Whether I support Amazon at large, I won't get too deep into that, because what I will get into is Red Seas Under Red Skies, which is, longtime listeners will know that I'm a huge fan of The Gentleman Bastard sequence by Scott Lynch. Red Seas Under Red Skies is the second book in that series, and you can listen to my friends pitching fantasy from, I think that was our most recent episode? I have no idea. But from our relatively recent Friends Pitching Fantasy episode, you can hear me talk more about it. But it's, we take our beloved thieves to the sea, not to be confused with Sea of Thieves, the game that Charles and our friend Charles Derrick and I did play at one point, and just kept getting like our ship destroyed and burned to the ground by presumably like 13-year-olds. So that was a disaster. But you know what's not a disaster is Red Seas Under Red Skies. And when I've talked about the Gentleman Bastards, I've both just when I think about myself and when I talk about with other people or pitching the books or what have you, I've always felt like I've needed to give this caveat of kind of each successive book is not as good as the last, with, for me, Lies of Locke Lamora being up there among my favorite books ever. And then, sorry, no editing, coughs out in the Dylan only episode. But the thing I've always thought, I've loved Lies of Locke Lamora, the first book in the series, so much. And I just think that I loved it so much the first time. This is only, I think, my second time reading it. Tops, it's third, but I don't really remember reading the second time. But anyway, I think the first time that I read Red Seas Under Red Skies, I was so focused on comparing it to how much I loved The Lies of Locke Lamora and how much more I feel like I love The Lies of Locke Lamora, that I think I almost didn't really appreciate Red Seas Under Red Skies as much as I could have, because I was just like, and I still think that Lies of Locke Lamora, barring something unforeseen when I read the third book again, I do think Lies of Locke Lamora is the strongest installment in the series. I don't think I'm near alone in that, but I think that Red Seas Under Red Skies is better than I was giving it credit for. And I think that the characterization and the focus on our main characters, I think you could even make the case that it's stronger, like more fully fleshed out in Red Seas Under Red Skies. I think the plot and just the way in which our beloved rogues and thieves get tied into just wild events in their city, in their world, in Lies of Lamora just appealed so much to me, and the introduction of the character Locke and that kind of stuff. I think that sticks with me extremely well from Lies of Lamora, but I think Red Seas Under Red Skies is a little better than I was giving it credit for, and I've been really appreciating the development of the Locke and Jean relationship, which this book and the following one, I think, really do a very strong job of it. And I think that there's introduction of new characters that are very interesting and captivating as well. So Red Seas Under Red Skies, better on the reread, and perhaps underrated by yours truly to this point. So kind of curious, honestly, if other folks have reread them or just read them the first time and had like a thought that Lies of Lamora was significantly better. Like, I guess I'm just curious if folks have similar experiences to me, or if maybe other people always appreciated Red Seas Under Red Skies. I think it does have a little bit of a higher rating on Goodreads than Lies of Lamora, which is kind of an interesting phenomenon that I don't know if maybe I've talked about this at some point, but it's just something I've observed is that it seems like when you talk to people about books, you're more likely, let's say, in the case of Lies of Lamora, you're more likely to find people are like saying the first book was better and the series went downhill and blah blah blah. Like, I think if you ask people in person, you're more likely to hear my favorite book of the three books that are out is The Lies of Lamora. I find this in general with a lot of series that the first book is the favorite when you're having conversations. But when you look at like Goodreads ratings, each successive book in a series, in my anecdotal observation, seems to do better than the previous installment. So like a second will do better than a first, a third will do better than a second, and so on. So I was like, what accounts for? So my speculation is that folks who just like really hate the book or it's not a fit for them at all, be it the genre, be it the characters, be it whatever, they're giving the book their 1-star rating for the first book in the series, and then they're leaving. They're not going back for the second book. So in the second book only has people who enjoyed the first book enough to move on to the second book, and those people are just way less likely to be giving like a 1-star. They at least something about that series appeals them enough to pick it up again. There are you always see the weird reviews though sometimes where it's like, I hated the first book and I just had to see what was going on in the second book, and it's like you're either some huge obsessed completionist or a masochist. I don't know, but I generally find, okay, the people who like the book, or I should say the series, less are dropping off, and I think that's what accounts for kind of the rating inflation of later books in the series. So I don't know. Anyone else notice that? Sound off in the comments, as they say on YouTube, if this did indeed make it onto YouTube. So that's Red Seas Under Red Skies. Charles finished that book a while back, so we will discuss that one when he gets back too. Next, I want to talk about Will of the Many. This is a book that I finished, and I would say, oh, you know what? Hold on. I feel like Charles said he was 90% into. Oh, you know what? He just texted me back. Huh? I don't know. Should I violate the sanctity of our text message exchange and just read, he just said his opinion on the Devils. Maybe he finished the Devils and yes, he had finished the Devils and he was 90% through Will of the Many. So, all right, I'm not gonna. It does look like he audiobooked the Devils, but I'm not gonna reveal his his take on the Devils. I kind of briefly skimmed it. So yes, uh, he had finished the Devils and was 90% done with the Will of the Many by James Islington. I From what I was gathering, he wasn't loving The Will of the May as much as I did because I loved it. I actually felt like it helped break me out of a reading slump. So that book, it follows the main character, Vis. It's like interesting present tense, first person, kind of like Daughter of Flood and Fury by Levi Jacobs was one that and I think The Hunger Games. So I've said this multiple times. I've never actually checked. But yeah, I find it, so it's an Academy novel, though it takes a bit to get there. But it's about this character Vis that this is not a spoiler because you find this out like right away. Who was a prince of a conquered land and now is trying to survive in the land that conquered his own, and he's got some quoth in him. He's got some being quite naturally good at quite a few things, and maybe not to quoth levels, quoth of King Killer fame, but we do know that James Islington said he was inspired to become a writer by the works of Brandon Sanderson, I think Miss Burns mentioned, and Patrick Rothfuss, The King Killer Chronicle. So that was a big thing that drew me to Islington's work because, hey, if you're inspired by authors that I absolutely adore, then it's a good chance that your books are going to be right up my alley. It's also interesting to be like seeing the authors inspired, like a new generation of authors inspired by authors that are, contemporary, really big authors. But I guess, just think of like, oh, Sanderson loved Wheel of Time, and that's kind of, Robert Jordan has since passed, and you think of those authors, at least in my head, those are like the contemporary folks. But now you have folks coming up who are like, I was inspired by Abercrombie. I was inspired by Sanderson, or who knows, Rebecca Kwong, who's like probably not even 30 yet, but has had books out long enough where some people are probably coming up inspired by her, right? Like, anyway, so James Islington, he inspired by some of my favorite authors, and I would say the King Killer influence is very present. Though maybe you could say there's this kind of hierarchical aspect, almost like a caste. So yeah, I'll say caste system. Yeah, sure, like a caste system element to how. Oh, I've really not been. I had these books like for the YouTube. I had these books right here, and I was gonna like holding up The Will of the Many and Red Seas Under Red Skies. Like I was gonna like talk about them and hold the books up, but I'm just like, I'm an audio guy traditionally. I'm still learning the video aspect of this. So, talking about Will of the Many, there's like this hierarchical aspect to the magic system. I think I've talked about this a little bit before, so I won't waste your time. But right, like you can kind of see it if you're on YouTube, where like different levels exist of how many people you have. They call it ceding will to you, giving up kind of some of their like power, I guess, like metaphysical power, which the higher up you are in this hierarchy, the more power you have, the more things you can do. So there's, I don't know if it's quite as hard a magic system with as defined rules as like Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, but it definitely you see some influence there. And I would say that this book is a great fit for King Killer fans, like the Academy aspects. There's a love interest in it too that just it did feel like there was some inspiration from the Quoth Denna situation. Again, not going to get into spoilers and stuff, but there's interesting twists in this book. The ending is really exciting, and and a lot of things took me by surprise, especially the ending. It's a long book. Like I think I mentioned it helped pull me out of a reading slump. When I think of books that will break a reading slump, I usually think of like short, kind of punch you in the mouth books, like, or at least short, easy to read books, and kind of get you the momentum of like finishing a book. Wolf of May, it did take me a little while, but it did, I think, capture my attention. It was action packed enough and pulled me in enough where it seemed to break me out of reading slump despite being a ridiculously long book. So maybe it's a good fit for folks trying to break out of reading slumps. I don't know if it'll have the effect out on me, but yeah, the King Killer fan in me who knows we may never get a third book, though I believe in you, Patrick Rothfuss. I know you're listening 36 minutes into a solo episode of Friends Talking Fantasy, and I believe in you. But I would say that it scratches the King Killer itch a little bit, and though totally different. I won't name names, but there are sometimes a writer is very clearly inspired by a book, perhaps even King Killer Chronicle, and they'll write a book that is ridiculously similar to the point, like, actually plagiarizing is very hard to pull off. I mean, it's easy if you are dedicated to achieving it, but right, like just copy and paste. But there's, I would say, if you make up new names and new places and new whatever, like you can write a story that is extremely similar to another story, and it's not going to be plagiarism. Like, you haven't taken someone's IP, and we've seen some people toe that line a lot. Like, and I would say, and people will say, like, there's a book I'm thinking of in particular, but again, I'm not going to name names, and the book is so similar to another book, perhaps one I've just been recently talking about, that it's it's been like kind of called by a lot of books like this feels like plagiarism, and some things were lifted pretty directly. And yeah. By the way, I'm not talking about The Will of the Many, if that is clear. I'm trying to make the point that Will of the Many is inspired by books I like, but does a good job of making it quite clearly distinct from those books. And it's all, everyone's got inspirations. Like, it's awesome to have inspirations. Just name that those are your inspirations, and write your own book. But some folks toe that line, and it's like, come on, we want to hear the story that you have to tell. And it's awesome if aspects of another story made you feel a certain way that you want to pass on to other people. But yeah, I love that The Will of the Many does that without ever feeling like it's lifting another story. It just gives some of the same vibes as something like King Killer. Strength of the Few is apparently coming out in November. That's the second book in the Hierarchy trilogy here. So if you want to read The Will of the Many beforehand, then now's your chance to get in. I mean, I don't think it'll take you 6 months quite, or a little less than that, but I don't think it'll take you until Strength of a Few comes out, unless, like, hey, everyone reads their own pace. I read Will of the Many kind of slow anyway, so, but great time to pick up Will of the Many and get ahead of Strength of the Few coming out next, or this upcoming November. All right, I want to talk about a couple of things, the news or whatever elements. um, uh, the the first thing that I wanted to talk about is the uh, cancellation of Wheel of Times series, the TV series that was on Amazon Prime. This is I'm I'm not like a Wheel of Time super fan or anything. I've read the first few books and I liked them, but I found my momentum kind of didn't didn't keep going with it. I mean, they're long books, right? And you have to really love them to keep rolling in a world where we have so many options. Sorry, to get some of my coffee, and probably the mouth noises without Charles's editing are probably not great here, but thank you for bearing with me. And so Wheel of Time, I actually wasn't really. I think I watched the first episode of the show, but I wasn't into it. So I'm not going to give you my deep takes about the show or whatever, right? I'm more interested in this idea of like why why do these shows come on and get what is going on with fantasy TV shows, right? We had Game of Thrones really just become this worldwide phenomenon, and it had captured the attention of the zeitgeist. And then there's like this wave of other shows that have followed it. Like comes to mind, I guess, is like uh, um, sorry, I'm completely The Witcher. Of course, this Wheel of Time show. There was, geez, why am I blank? The Magician's Show by that was an adaptation that was, I would say, loosely based on Lev Grossman's, I think, awesome novels. And many more. I'm sure I'm not. Rings of Power is obviously a huge one, and then I'm sure many I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. But point being, a lot of these shows just like don't last or don't pick up nearly the steam that. It always feels like the it's almost like the kiss of death when a show's coming out. It's like, it's gonna be the next Game of Thrones. And it's like, no, it won't. And I don't know if anything really will be, right? House of the Dragon came out and it's big, but it's not the next Game of Thrones. It's not the main thing that everyone is focused on or talking about when it comes to TV. I mean, there's usually something like that going around. I don't know what it is right now. Maybe it feels like it was Severance, and then now there's a little bit of a lull. Like hear people talk about like White Lotus and stuff like that, but it was never Wheel of Time. I feel like this was the kind of thing like you grab someone on the street and you're like, "Are you watching Wheel of Time?" And instead of like not everyone was watching Game of Thrones, so someone might say no if you ask them on the street in season 4 of Game of Thrones or whatever, "Are you watching it?" They might say no, I'm not into fantasy, whatever. But the more likely are probably going to say yes. And even if they don't, right? They know what it is. Now, still, even though it's been not on for a while, people know what Game of Thrones is. I think you grab someone on the street and you're like, hey, are you watching Wheel of Time? You're much more likely to get an answer of what is Wheel of Time than you are a yes or no. I feel like maybe you're going to know, even if they don't know. But you know what I mean. Not it hasn't captured the zeitgeist, and maybe the Witcher, let's say, got closer, and this was a while ago too. But Wheel of Time and Rings of Power and a lot of these other shows just can't seem to break through, and they're, I mean, I don't know. Maybe lots of people are watching Rings of Power, but there's preposterous amount of money thrown into that. And I think that's, I'm no expert in how these things work, but I would say that it's interesting to watch Wheel of Time, which came in with a gigantic fan base already, get through 3 seasons, have the third season from everything that I saw be considered like the best season yet of the show. Like it's finally hit its stride and then boom, canceled. I think this is just like how these streaming services work in some ways. Like it's not limited to just fantasy shows, but they just like take a shot at something like Wheel of Time cost a lot of money. Even if people are watching, they're not. It didn't become the next Game of Thrones, so and they don't care about you. Amazon doesn't care about you, I guess, is one of the themes of this episode. I didn't realize I'd be making that point, but they don't. I mean, and it's not limited to Amazon, right? Netflix doesn't care about you. Hulu doesn't care about you. Apple TV doesn't care about you. None of them care about you and your like. But I like Wheel of Time or whatever. It's like this. The bottom line, right, is what matters to them, and they're not afraid to pull something. The critics, the fans could say this is the best season yet, but it's not about the quality of the show in their eyes. It's about the bottom line. How much money are we putting into this, and how many people are watching this, and is that enough to justify? I'm sure it's more complicated than just that, but the point is, it's a question about money, not about quality of the show, and we've seen that displayed here, where Wheel of Time bites the dust, goes the way of Charles's beloved puppet show. What was that? Dark Crystal, right? Sorry, Charles. Like the world wasn't ready for that many puppets, and I would say that it's kind of a shame, but I'm also kind of curious. I do wonder how many people are watching this show, because I always think, I don't watch a lot of these fantasy TV shows. Like, I'll usually give them a try, right? Like I did watch the first few episodes of, let's say, Rings of Power, and I think I watched the first episode. Like I had memories of like the first episode of Wheel of Time, what the characters look like and stuff. So I think I did, and watched the first season of The Witcher, and Charles and I sat down and tried to watch The Magicians at one point, right? And I probably should Google like what other fantasy shows come to mind, but point being, I usually give them a try if they're like a big one or an adaptation of something I really am really interested in. But I would say I don't have the answers here, but I'm kind of, I guess, a curious reflection is, why can't Wheel of Time get me, or like me doesn't matter that much, but me and others like me to watch this show? Like I've read some of the books, like it's clearly got a lot of production value and all kind of stuff. Why can't they keep someone like me captivated? And same with Rings of Power or what have you. And I don't know. I really don't, because I think there's a lot of readers that are probably like me and aren't watching these shows. Because you'd think if every Wheel of Time fan was watching this Wheel of Time show, like Wheel of Time readers, I should say, or watching this Wheel of Time show, that's a lot of people. And then if some people like me who are kind of like borderline Wheel of Time people, maybe they've read a few books like me, or they're Wheel of Time curious, if they're in that boat, then they would watch too, right? And then all you have to do is pick up some people who didn't know what this was like in the first place, and you probably have a good audience then, right? Like that's probably what happened with the Song of Ice and Fire. Then I don't know. Or I should say, with Game of Thrones, as they picked up on both the Song of Ice and Fire fans, the people who kind of like fantasy, and they saw Sean Bean, they're like, Lord of the Rings, I liked that. Maybe I'll like this show. And then the people who were like, I don't know what this is, just kind of caught on eventually. But yeah, there's something that's not working, and maybe the market's just like saturated of fantasy shows at this point. Like Game of Thrones came, and it was like there've never been anything like it, and now we know every show comes on that's fantasy, and it's like gonna be the next Game of Thrones, and that isn't. So I don't know why this is not working. Maybe it's oversaturated, uh, but that's that's what happens, I guess. And yeah, these streaming services are notorious for just pulling shows, right? So anyway, that's Wheel of Time. Sorry to the big Wheel of Time fans. I hope I wasn't callous in my approach to this. I feel for you all. If this was like, I see people on social media who are like devastated, so I feel for you, and I'd be sad too if this was a thing I was super into. And all right, another thing that I wanted to touch on is George R. R. Martin had a recent blog post, and this is. Let me even get to this post because it's like. Let me find it because it's like. I don't want to sound callous here either, but I'm like, it's not something I care about. The focus of the post, the reason the post was made, I don't really care about, which is it's called Howard Meets Hercules, and it's starts out, it's pretty short, so I can probably just read it. So it goes, for all you Howard Waldrop fans out there, if you enjoyed our short films, the adaptations of Mary Margaret Road Grader, Night of the Cooters, and The Ugly Chickens that we've been showing at film festivals over the past couple of years, we have big news a-coming. A Waldrop feature, and you know, when you hear George R.R. Martin say, we have big news a-coming, what you think is what comes next in the blog post. A Waldrop feature is on the way, all animated from Lion Forge. Is that what you were hoping when you heard that big news is a coming from George R. R. Martin? Well, if not, trust me, George has an idea what you might be thinking, and he'll get to that in the blog post. So it continues. It's an and maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm out of the loop. Like I don't know what any of this stuff is. Maybe this is something to be embarrassed about as someone who makes fantasy content. Maybe this Waldrop thing is like huge. I don't know, but I feel like it's not. And anyway, it's an This is George R. R. Martin's blog continues. It's an adaptation of Howard's novella A Dozen Tough Jobs. His take on the 12 labors of Hercules. Joe Lansdale, the sage of Nacogdoches, Nacogdoches, father of Hap and Leonard, and creator of Bubba Hotep, did the screenplay, and no one could have done it better except maybe Howard his own self. Okay, then we have in parentheses, I know. Some of you will just be pissed off by this, as you are by everything I announce here that is not about Westeros or the Winds of Winter. You've given up on me, or on the book. I will never finish Winds. If I do, I will never finish A Dream of Spring. If I do, it won't be any good. I ought to get some other writer to pinch hit for me. I'm going to die soon anyway because I am so old. I lost all interest in A Song of Ice and Fire decades ago. I don't give a shit about. That's gonna hurt the FTF clean rating right here, but I don't give a crap. You know, that's an edit. And obviously the sarcasm is clear in what George is saying. I hope you're not taking this to at just face value. So he says, I don't give a crap about writing any longer. I just sit around and spend my money. I edit the Wild Cards books too, but you hate Wild Cards. You may hate everything else I have ever written. The Hugo Winners and Hugo Losers, A Song for Laia, and Dying of the Light, Sand Kings and Beauty and the Beast, This Tower of Ashes, A Stone City, Old Mars and Old Venus, and Rogues and Warriors and Dangerous Women, and all the other anthologies I edited with my friend Gardner Dozois. I never know how to say Gardner's last name, but anyway, I edited with my friend Gardner Dozois. You don't care about any of those, I know. You don't care about anything but Winds of Winter. You've told me so often enough. Thing is, I do care about them. Right, George saying, hey, like he works on all this other stuff because he cares about them too, obviously. I think that's kind of self-evident, but And justice for Fever Dream, George's book about steamboat vampires on steamboats. He didn't mention it in this. I love Fever Dream. I also love Rogues and Dangerous Women. I've read those anthologies. There's Scott Lynch and Joe Abercrombie stuff in Rogues, and Dangerous Women has a lot of exciting authors working there too. It's like short story anthologies. Anyway, George goes on. Thing is, I do care about them. And I care about Westeros and Winds as well. The Starks and Lannisters and Targaryen, Tyrion and Asha, Dany and Daenerys, the dragons and the direwolves. I care about them all. More than you can ever imagine. I loved A Dozen Tough Jobs the first time I read ages ago. I loved Howard too. It saddens me that he did not live long enough to see the film. I hope we do him justice. How can we not? Hercules, Howard, Joe, Lionforge. I wish you all could share my excitement at the press play of this movie. For those who do, The Hollywood Reporter broke the story. Okay. So what we are probably more focused on, me anyway, is this I care this bit where he says, okay, I'm hearing all your criticism, right? Everyone hates everything except for Winds of Winter. Everyone's mad that I'm not writing and blah, blah, blah. But he cares about his other projects, but he also cares about Westeros and Winds. It's a little bit of a weird statement, this bit. I care about Westeros and Winds as well. The Starks and Lannisters and Targaryens, Tyrion and Asha, Dany and Daenerys, the dragons and the direwolves. I care about them all more than you can ever imagine, right? It's kind of a weird, like, I don't know. It seemed a little off to me. Like, and this isn't the main point I have to make, but I was like, Tyrion and Asha is like a weird choice that those two would be like grouped together. It's like Starks and Lannisters and Targaryens, comma, Tyrion and Asha, like everyone's favorite dynamic duo, Tyrion and Asha. Asha, for people who are more into the show or haven't read the books a long time like me, I was like, Asha is like Yara Greyjoy, right? Like her name in the books is Asha. I'm pretty sure that's who she is. But then he says Dany and Daenerys. I'm like, those aren't Dany. Am I taking crazy pills? Like, aren't Dany and Daenerys the same person, right? Like Dany in the it's been a while since I've read the books, but Dany is just like a nickname for Daenerys, right? And he says Dany and Daenerys. Whatever. So that part's a little weird. I don't really know what to make of those words choices, but that is, I would say, secondary to the point I want to get at, which is, so I have empathy for both sides here. I'm kind of, I default with authors to this place of like, they don't owe you anything. Like, they are their own people that should live their own lives. And if they don't want to write another book, I will be sad. But they don't owe me not making me sad. If anything, authors that make you sad, right? Those are the best kind. But hopefully make you sad by writing a book, not by neglecting to. But point being, they're people. And honestly, in my opinion, if George does want to, I know he's saying this sarcastically, but if he doesn't give a crap about writing any longer and he just wants to sit around and spend his money, I kind of think more power to him. Like, sure, why not? Like, I'd be sad because I want the books, but I think the sadness or frustration maybe is what comes to mind for more fans is this thing that is normal, right? You do kind of feel like you were brought into some sort of like arrangement or relationship. You're reading the first book in a series and way more when it comes to George's books. And it's like you do kind of feel like I deserve some sort of answer to where all this goes. And it's tough to be very like journey. It's the journey, not the destination about everything. But I mean, I do kind of see things that way. Like, you can't take away the joy and meaning that I've gotten out of Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire, even though the ending to Game of Thrones stunk, and we may never get an ending to A Song of Ice and Fire. Though I believe in you, George. I know you're listening. I know you're 58 minutes or whatever into me recording a podcast with poor editing or lack of editing. I know, George. I know you're a huge Friends Talking Fantasy fan, and you're still here. So I believe in you. But it's okay if he doesn't want to keep going with the books. I hope that's not true. I don't think that's true. Like, I think in his head, like, he's like, I don't know how often he's sitting down to write. Who can know the heart of a man, as they say, but I do think he at least conceptually wants to keep writing these books. But it's got to be really hard to do when you're at this stage. And it's a long, complicated series, and there's a lot to work out there. So, George, more power to you. But fans out there who are frustrated, I hear you too. Just like, I don't want you taking it out on the author in a way that, like, you can tell George, like, this weighs on him. Like, yes, he's got lots of money and he's famous, I guess, but he's still a person. He has feelings, like, and this stuff really does impact him, and it's not going to make him more likely to write the book. Like, you gotta know that. Like, you yelling at him and being like, where's Winds of Winter? Like, do you think that motivates George? Like, it doesn't. It just makes him feel like crap, clearly. So, yes, your frustration is real and valid, and or your sadness, if you like me, or this anxiety. Are we ever gonna get Winds of Winter or an end to the series? But how do we channel that? Maybe we need to go for a run. Maybe we need to take up mindfulness meditation. I don't know. Who's to say? Maybe you need a hobby. You need to start a podcast. Maybe you need to be like me and talk for an hour into a microphone. No one talking back to you. This is like, I think if I really sat down and thought about it, I probably, knowing myself, believe it or not, I can be long-winded and I can talk a lot. I probably could have realized, yes, I can just sit. I thought this was going to be a half hour, but I can just sit here and talk really long without, am I saying anything coherent or interesting or valuable? That's up to you to decide. I'll remain agnostic on that point, but I can talk for, like, how long is this? This is like for over an hour. To a microphone by myself. So as a proof of concept, I can do a Friends Talking Fantasy episode. Probably the worst one in history, but an episode all by myself, and I take deep pride in that, I guess. So, yes, that's today's episode. I am really excited for the next episode that'll come out, which will be we'll have a guest on, and won't be me rambling into a mic for an hour straight. I hope it won't be me rambling for an hour straight, because that would be really rude to our guest, who I think we'll all be excited to hear from. So, yeah, reach out. Hey, like, you can email us at the ftfpodcast@gmail.com. We are still on Instagram at the FTF Podcast. Ring that bell if this is on YouTube. Subscribe. Right, that's what it is. Subscribe. Yeah. And follow on Spotify or whatever. If you do have the time, toss 5 stars to our podcast on Spotify. Write a review if you can on Apple. I just saw a new one that was very nice and understanding about that things have been a little more sporadic lately, but I hope we can find a good momentum. At the very least, hey, like, I'm going to try to keep these things coming, probably mostly with guests, but maybe with just, I can do it. I can talk for an hour plus, still going. But I am going to stop. I'm going to stop now. Okay. I'm not going to give Charles his line either. I don't know what do I say at the end of episodes? Um, I don't know. Thank you for listening. Oh, what do I say? Or watching too. Just listening or watching is more than enough. Thank you so much for doing that. And yeah, you should be hearing from me and a guest pretty soon.